Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Catapult's first Thinking Differently of 2023. We're going to pause for just a minute as we allow our attendees to come in from the waiting room. Hope everyone had enjoyable holidays and got to rest and rejuvenate and do something fun, and is setting their sights on a successful and productive 2023. All right. Since we are just a minute past the hour, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off for our first Thinking Differently series. As I mentioned, again, it's my pleasure as CEO and president of Catapult to lead our Thinking Differently series. And today, I'm really excited for our session on leading during change. Many of you who have been longtime members of Catapult, or perhaps our legacy organizations, the Employers Association of Charlotte or Capital Associated Industries in Charlotte, know that we ourselves as Catapult have undergone significant changes over the last couple of years. And the organizations merged in January of 2021 to form Catapult. I had the pleasure of joining as the new CEO late in the year, just about November of 2021. And so I've got about 14 months now under my belt, and we have seen significant change in those 14 months. So we decided no better activity to kick off the new year to lend some insight into both being agile and leaning into change and looking at the enduring properties of when change is managed well, how that can support your organization, both on an organizational level and an individual level. So I'm delighted today to have two colleagues join me. These two women were instrumental in the evolution of Catapult, where we started as a merged organization in 2021 and where we are today in January of 2023, moving forward as one Catapult. So let me introduce my two guests here, and we're going to start with Dr. Kristy Teskey. Kristy is an innovation catalyst for Faster Glass, based in Charlotte. Kristy describes herself as a perpetual big thinker, a problem solver, and a meaning maker. I can attest that she takes sparks of ideas and she helps people and organizations bring those to life. She's an avid believer that great organizations are ones that fully align with values, people, strategy, and culture. Before joining Faster Glass, Kristy led the creation and the collective planning process for the statewide cross-sector education initiative, My Future NC. She also served as the inaugural executive director of the John M. Belk Endowment, where she shaped the national education to workforce philanthropic portfolio for the Bank of America Charitable Foundation. Outside of work, Kristy is very active. She channels her leadership into community board roles at Leadership North Carolina, the YWCA of Central Carolinas, and NC State's University School of Education Advisory Board. She recently earned her doctorate of education in organizational leadership from Northeastern University, and she holds a Master of Public Administration in Nonprofit Management from UNC Charlotte. So welcome, Kristy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Cheryl.
My second guest is another rock star in our community, Jessica Graham. Jessica is the founder and president of Fionix Consulting. And I will tell you firsthand that few professionals know strategic communications like Jessica. For more than 25 years, she's served as a trusted industry leader, strategic thought partner, and she helps drive results and make impact in companies throughout the Carolinas and beyond. She has solved every strategic communications problem possible and designed award-winning and dynamic solutions for a wide range of organizations in a variety of industries, including retail, telecommunications, legal, healthcare, and education. Like Kristy, Jessica is also a leader in her profession in the community. She received her accreditation in public relations in 2003 and was named to the Public Relations Society of America College Fellows in 2019. She's also an active volunteer in the Public Relations Society of America Charlotte chapter, the Southeast District, and nationally. In fact, she's currently a PRSA national board member. Locally, she has also served on a number of boards and actively volunteered in organizations like Dress for Success, the American Lung Association, the Charlotte Center for the Humanics and Civic Imagination, Women Executives of Charlotte, Providence Day School, another Leadership North Carolina, and Leadership Charlotte. So Jessica, thank you as well for being with us. This is going to be a really fun conversation with the two of you, because both of you know Catapult in a way like few others know Catapult, and have been partners with us as we've been on our own journey and leading change. So let's talk a little bit about how Catapult came to be. And so I would like to lead off and invite Kristy to give us kind of a context setting of how the initial merger came to be between TEA and CAI, and maybe talk about the initial integration in what the period I call BC, because that was before Cheryl. So all the things leading up to November of 2021. Kristy, you want to talk us through some of that?
Great. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And I'm going to start with a high-level definition. I'm going to talk a little bit about change management, because I think change management, how you lead through it, and then how we worked with what is now Catapult in leading through this change of integration. All of that is very important as a setup. So a high-level definition of change management is simply how company leaders manage what processes, systems, structure, overall morale, and employee responsibilities during the transition. And on paper, this completely sounds easy, but I think everyone on this call knows that organizations are products of the way people within the organizations think and interact. So it's this people issue that sometimes is what we come against when we start talking about change, because it can cause confusion, fear, anxiety, and people start bunkering down and go in that fight or flight mentality. And they just want to know what's in it for them, like what's going to happen to me. And so when you think about change, how do you address that as a leader? You know, in John Cotter's book, The Heart of Change, he states the most fundamental problem in all stages of organizational change is changing the behavior of people. And I think as leaders, we've all experienced that. So traditionally in change management, leaders try to avoid this messiness at all, and they start making decisions in silos and behind closed doors with only select voices at the table. And then they roll out the change with a lot of expectations of everything to go well and everyone to fall in line. But to manage change strategically is to create a process that is proactive, that helps calm the chaos. We're going to talk a little bit about that, instead of that reactive culture that chases individual anxieties, because once you roll out those ideas of change and the expectations are there that everybody just goes along with the change, then you have the anxiety. So the question is, when's the best time for that messiness? I would argue that messiness is going to be better on the front end and bringing people into the process. So you want to give people an opportunity to come into the process and to help change the way they think and interact, is that they are involved and engaged with the change, because they're part of designing the change that they're actually going to be implementing. So at Faster Glass, we take that innovative approach of change management using design thinking methodology, and that incorporates human-centered design. And what that means is focusing and centering people at the heart of any initiative. So the whole idea is that we design with people, not for people. So Faster Glass was brought in to help with the merger and integration of CAI in the Triangle and TEA in Charlotte and is now what is known as Catapult. So in creating this human-centered design process, we focused on designing with these two organizations and not for them. And three key areas: leadership, process, and people. I'm going to start with process and people because the leadership is throughout, and there's some key pieces that I want to highlight at the end around leadership that really helps this type of innovative and transformational process of human-centered design change management. So when you think about human-centered change management, it involves creating shared understanding of why the change must happen, a better understanding of people's experiences, and then promoting collaboration and engagement as a way of getting things done. We started this integration with surveys and interviews. So every employee at both organizations had an opportunity to do one or the other. And it was clear from the results that there was excitement on both sides regarding what a combined organization could offer. And they also had ideas on improvements of a brand new organization. So some of the key themes that came from the research that we did is hoping that the integration would fuel a more innovative, future-forward organization and increase the new combined company's relevancy to employers. And they wanted to see that done through modernization of technology and curriculum, a greater focus on diversity and inclusion, and having a name and brand that is relevant to the work. So internally, both organizations wanted to use the opportunity to implement better processes for cross-functional communication and partnership between departments. Does that sound familiar to anybody? And then they wanted to make sure that everyone understood the capacity of the full organization and could communicate all services and offerings, regardless what line of business you're in. Interesting, there was also strong feedback regarding organizational structure. And the main thing that kept coming up over and over again is please make sure the right people are in the right seats. So I bring all of this up from the surveys, one, because I have a feeling some of these things might sound a bit familiar to all of you, but it really shows that the people within an organization, the ones that see and do every day, they have great ideas. They understand the organization better than all, and they want to be a part of change that takes place and something that they spend their time in and day out. From these survey results, we created an integration charter for the process, and that included a vision, list of values, and that helped provide guidance and structure and accountability to the work that was ahead for everybody. So design with, not for, opportunities were created for employees across both organizations. And we had 64% of CAI employees. That was a bit bigger organization, and 71% of employees at TEA actually participated in the integration process. So when we say design with, not for, it was about bringing as many employees as we could within an organized process so that there was voice of employee in everything that was decisioned. So to give a sense of this process, there were the two CEOs that were planning to retire once the integration was complete. We created an integration team, which were 4 senior leaders, 2 from each organization. And then they were responsible for creating the framework for the employee involvement and then steering those teams towards the future organization structure. From there, we also created an advisory leadership team that was about 15 people. These were cross-functional individuals from both organizations tapped to lead one of the 11 work teams that represented line of businesses and workflows. So we had work teams that really worked on the issues throughout, and I'm going to talk about that in just one second. And one of the advisory leadership team priorities was to eliminate the silos, so that what we saw in the surveys was people wanted to make sure that there was cross-functionality. We started that immediately, and we wanted to eliminate silos and build relationships both within each organization and across both organizations, and work across those line of businesses and function. Then we had working teams, and that's where we had the majority of employees. There were about 40 employees total in the working teams, including the advisory leadership team. And these individuals were brought in to share their subject matter expertise in their designated focus area. And then each working team created the blueprints for the future structure, the processes for those future structures, and then any needed positions in the assigned focus area. So they really had a lot of opportunity to create what Catapult became. One of the most important roles in this kind of big change and leading this kind of big change is making sure that you have a project manager lead. It was one of the most important roles for this integration, and that person supported both the integration leadership team and the advisory leadership team through workflows, tools and resources, how to use them, and making sure people were using them, help facilitate exchange of information both horizontally and vertically, and then consult with working team leads. So making sure that no one is spinning and that everyone stays focused. And that's really when we talk about leadership, and I'm going to bring this up in just a minute. When we talk about leadership, it's about keeping that focus, staying the course, trusting the process, even if it seems really messy, because when people have input, the messiness starts leveling out and you're going to have more stickiness on the back end. And that's really what we're all going for, is making sure that if you're going to make change happen, that you get to the outcome you desire and that you have that sustainability of the outcome. So some of the tools that we used through this process in change management and making sure that it was inclusive is those team charters. We felt those were extremely important. We had both an integration team charter that was overarching, and then each work team had a team charter to make sure that they held each other accountable with how they wanted to work together. Because remember, these were people from different organizations who had never worked together before, and making sure that they had shared understanding of what expectations were. We also did what we call a SWOT plus process. Excuse me. We did that through, and that was with everybody all at one time. And this was over COVID, I have to remind everybody. So we were virtual and we were able to do this using some online tools. And what was really exciting about this is that everyone had a chance to comment across all lines of businesses of both ideas and ways to improve. And then the plus piece of a SWOT process is, so for strengths, here are our strengths. Then the next question is, well, what would you like to do with those strengths? These are our weaknesses. Well, how would you like to address those weaknesses? How should we address those weaknesses? Should you address those weaknesses? And it allowed everyone to have input across all lines of businesses for what everyone was heading toward with the new, we called it NewCo. So what would become Catapult. Everybody was focused on what do we want to see. We also did working team design sprints, and this is really where we got into the work, where the working teams would do some work and then we all came together. Those working teams would present out what the ideas they had been thinking about to all the other working teams, and then those individuals were able to comment and provide feedback on what they thought about those ideas. Interesting enough, through all of this process, what we found is that as we got toward the end of integration, and this is just one example of when you design with, not for, and people start talking across functionalities, the IT person was just like, whoa, wait a minute. If everybody's going live at the same time, we've got to timeline that out, because what was happening, everybody was assuming that we were all going to go live at the same time, but yet all of the changes in IT needed to take place. So then that allowed everyone to have a conversation about, well, let's think about timing of when everything gets done, how the IT is going to roll out, and then training on any software. We had half of the new organization needed to be trained on the software that was chosen. So you have to account for that time. So instead of sticking to the initial timeline, it's coming back together and going, we can't do that. We have to give IT a chance to train and make sure that everybody's ready for the go live. I mean, it sounds small, But something like that, without talking cross-functionally, could really impede a change effort of this magnitude tremendously. So that change alone, it just pushed everything out by 3 weeks. So when you think of it in the big picture, that 3 weeks really made a huge difference. So in all of this, communication was key. And I know Jessica is going to talk about communication as well, but we did communication in a lot of different levels. There were weekly opportunities for touch points with all teams to stay connected, have clarity of expectations between major milestones, and ensure everyone hears, understands, and feels part of this bigger idea of what is now Catapult. We did lunch and learns, project manager and consultant office hours, leadership fireside chats, weekly newsletters. And then as the integration approached and the working teams disbanded, we did weekly staff huddles to make sure that everyone was staying engaged in the conversation. Two of the key themes that came out through all of this process was working as one and trust the process. So I'm sure everyone got really tired of me saying that. Trust the process. Trust this process. Because it's messy and it deals with people. So this is where leadership comes into play. The leadership piece of all of this requires vision, support, and trust. So the vision of what the organization can be, and never to lose that vision as the messiness starts creeping in. The support of their people to be included, because that takes intentionality because of the messiness of change, and pulling the knowledge and expertise of the people to build a better system and more innovative system, to pull from all their ideas because they're on the front line doing the work. And most of all, trust. Trust in the people and trust in the process. It's very easy to get dismayed when the messiness of change occurs with a lot of people involved. Leaders have to stay the course and be unwavering. I'm sorry, excuse me just a second. Almost lost my voice. Unwavering around the clarity and innovation that comes from that diversity of thought. So when you don't have the diversity of thought at the table, if you just have your senior leaders at the table, then you miss out on what we heard from those that are day in and day out doing the work and came up with some of the most innovative ideas that were eventually implemented into what is now Catapult. So the integration was the focus, but the implementation is also part of the change process. The consultants' work, our consulting work, waned a bit during the implementation, and there were a few hiccups during that part of it. It was not as organized, because what people assumed is once you finish with the integration, well, implementation is just BAU. The problem is that integration of that magnitude of change is still part of the change process and needed to be considered as such. Where the major bumps really came into play is when the leaders reverted back to traditional methodology and mindset and made decisions in a silo and pushed those out. Because you had employees who were now excited about being engaged in the process, when you take them out of that process and then you just start delivering what they need to do and telling them that, that doesn't sit very well. And so then you started having some issues around people's anxiety starting to raise again, and people starting to wonder what's going to happen. Another thing that took place is the lag time. We had a go live date, and that was in February. A lot of great momentum went into that because of the process that was created. And then, as we all know, the CEO search took a little while, and I think Cheryl's going to talk a little bit to this. Is that there was some time between the go live in February and Cheryl, I don't want to give you a fake date. I think it was August?
November 1st, basically.
November. Yeah. Yes. So because they interviewed in July and August. So if you can imagine that time frame from February And let's take that all the way through to November without a chosen leader of a new organization. You can imagine what happened with people's fears, anxiety, what's going to happen to my role, what's going to happen, all of these what if started coming in people's mind. And you really started seeing that in the frustration and in whenever I was speaking to some of the employees, you could hear that from them, because they were working so hard on all of these ideas they created. But that CEO search took a bit longer than what was anticipated or planned. So, there's words to the wise there of making sure that as a leader that you trust the process, stay as close to the plan as possible, and making sure that you've taken into account not only the change itself, but after the change also needs to be taken into account, and making sure you have that time frame that is still organized, and that you're still checking in with people, and that you're not just pushing them out immediately to business as creating a new business as usual. People want to know that they're heard. People want to know that that there's leadership around them, and people want to be continue to be a part of the change, and not that it was part of this one process, but that it's about who you are and as part of the culture. So I will stop there, Cheryl.
Thank you, Kristy. It was great, and it heartens me to hear the intentionality about the culmination of the integration process, because I think that speaks very much to best practices of change management. And I'm glad you ended where you did in some of the hurdles and the obstacles, because it gives a lens then for me to share kind of my perspective coming in. And I'll do that for a few minutes, and then we're going to shift to Jessica to talk us through kind of where we've come here. So I'll pick up where Kristy left off in the change of leadership and how important that was. I came to the search process with 30 years of background in higher education. Was most known for building new departments, building new organizations, and even standing up a brand new campus from the ground up when I started Northeastern University in Charlotte here, which has now been about 14 years ago. But one of the things that I learned in higher education is that you have a lot of constituents in an organization, not just employees, but you have a lot of different people who see their role in the organization in a very different way, right? Coming from that environment, I had worked with faculty who were subject matter experts in their fields and thought that their role was the most important role at the institution, which it was in many ways, because they were delivering the products and services. But then there were also staff, and staff meaning everyone from the facilities crew and the individuals who cleaned up residence halls, all the way to those who were helping students select their career path in a career center. And of course, important people who were helping them figure out how to finance it all. So all of those other roles in those institutions were equally as important to the roles of faculty. And don't forget that we also had students who were our customers, who had a voiced opinion in the direction of where the organization was going and the products and services that they wanted to see. We had alumni who wanted to preserve the brand of the institution that they graduated from, because we all know that preserving that brand is important in getting the next job. And we had board members and trustees and community members. So I was well versed in the notion that Kristy mentioned, which was around engagement, bringing people together to follow a vision and go forward with it. And also recognizing that there had been a lot of that messiness in the 9 months that took place between the great work of Faster Glass and then my introduction to the team at the end of October. And I remember that first call when I got on one of the weekly huddles that Kristy mentioned, the entire company on a huddle, and they introduced me as the new CEO. People had no idea who I was. All they knew is that I was leaving a presidency of Johnson & Wales University to come lead an employers association that was focused on helping employers overcome their obstacles and provide support in HR and people resources. But they had no idea who I was. So this notion that Kristy mentioned about rebuilding trust, I had to do from the get-go. And I had to do it on Zoom, like this, on a small screen with a lot of people on the other end who I'm sure were texting each other back and forth as my announcement was made. Who is this person? I'm sure there were a lot of Google searches that went on at that time. And I had to start from day one, positioning myself as both that visionary leader that Kristy mentioned, building vision, building the direction that we were going, and building trust with my colleagues. So we had a lot of messy days early on in that tenure, and it was no fault of anything except I think what Kristy mentioned about staying true to the process and trusting the process and shoring up that lag time. There were 9 months leading up to my arrival that people had the opportunity to create new scenarios and new visions in their mind of what my leadership style was going to be. Were we going to stay true to the vision that had been created during the integration, or was I going to come in and upend everything and take us in a new direction? And so there was a lot of angst and anxiety in the system. We did an initial culture survey in December of 2021, and it was apparent. There was a lot of anxiety in the system. People reinforced the notion that Kristy mentioned. They wanted to make sure that the right people were in the right seats. They wanted to be assured that culture mattered, that we were going to make progress in reducing silos. Frankly, they were afraid of losing a lot of the things that they had come to love about the organization working there as employees, and they wanted to make sure that that was going to be upheld. And there was apprehension about where the new direction of the organization was going. So that happened in December. We also had a lot of messy pieces that happened really before I arrived. On my first day, I came in down 3 of 5 of the senior leaders before we even started working. We lost an entire department of turnover. I think people were tired. They didn't know, and what Kristy talked about earlier, this fight or flight kind of kicked in, and people said, "I'm just tired. I've done the valiant fight. It's time for me to move on. I need to find a better place." And that was really hard. And I equate that to ripping off a Band-Aid, right? In the moment, it hurts really badly, and you're not really sure how you're going to get through it. But a year, 14 months later, I'm really pleased as we get to evolve and show how what we did with intentionality and following these principles of good leadership during change has actually benefited us now. So let me talk about a little bit of that. We were very intentional in setting a strategic framework and mission, vision, values. Kristy mentioned that the work that Faster Glass had done did talk a little bit about orienting people on a mission and the vision of the integration and the values. But what was not done was doing that as a company. And so starting in January of 2021, we set out on developing our strategic framework for Catapult. Our mission, which is our why we exist, the values, how we operate, the vision of where we're going as an organization 5 to 10 years ahead. And then we layered in this thing that Jim Collins calls the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. It's not quite a 10-year vision plan, but it's broader than a 1-year goal. And it was our 3-year game plan of where we wanted to be as Catapult in 3 to 5 years. So we spent a little time there, and then we started tapering it down into 1-year goals or priorities that we could focus on. And we've been cascading that down through departments and teams so that every individual in the organization knows what they need to do every year that lead up all the way through this pyramid to our why and why it's important. So let me spend a little bit of time talking about what we did here. It was important to me that we keep the continuity of Faster Glass. They were the trusted advisor and the trusted partner in integrating the two organizations. I was an unknown leader. So it was important for me to bridge that trust by bringing in Faster Glass into the mission, vision, values process. They sat alongside us and did exactly what Kristy said. They designed with us. And so we created 3 teams, cross-functional individuals at various levels in the organization, some in leadership positions, some in individual contributor positions, but all individuals who we knew could be early adopters of our strategic framework and help become champions internal to the organization. So our mission team was provided with a charter that was, why do we exist? Why does Catapult exist for the purpose of our members? That team was 10 members with an executive leadership sponsor. We had a vision team that was creating our where we're going. Where are we going 5 to 10 years from now? And that team also had 10 members, cross-functional, and an executive sponsor. And then we had our values team that came together, another team of 10, cross-functional team that really was focused on the culture of the organization. How do we operate? What are the norms? What are the behaviors we expect in the organization? And the executive sponsor's role was to make sure that the mission team, the vision team, and the values team were all staying within the same guardrails so that at the end of the day, when the mission, the vision, and the values were developed, they were symbiotic, they were integrated, and they were would advance each of our initiatives throughout the organization. So on our next slide, I'm pleased to show you what we came up with. And for those of you who have attended our Thinking Differently or some of our events at Catapult, you know that we start out every one of those events talking about our mission. The mission to provide employers with the confidence to navigate everyday operational challenges, making your workplaces more effective and your employees more successful. And we do this because we believe that accelerating a world of exceptional workplaces can be achieved because engaged people are driving business success. This was important for us as a membership-based organization to be very clear in why we're here and how we're helping accelerate the business that all of our members do. And then from a value standpoint, our team came up with 5 core values of how we operate. And it's no surprise that it goes back to the things that Kristy mentioned about the intentionality of our integration, right? It was about, I think she mentioned in here that leadership was important. They wanted a future-focused organization that celebrated diversity, equity, and inclusion, that had service at its core. So it's no surprise that our 5 core values came out: innovation, integrity, community, excellence, and service. A lot of this stems in my leadership style as well. In the predictive index, I'm a captain. A captain is a big picture thinker who likes innovation, who likes change, and strives for excellence. So it's not surprising to me that our mission, vision, values were deeply intertwined with my core values as an individual and as a leader. And it's why I chose to jump from the presidency of a university to the presidency of a membership-based organization statewide, because I saw the opportunity for us to lean into our potential and really lean forward in carrying our own organization into the future and bringing our members along. So we've also kept a lot of the best practices that Kristy mentioned, and I'm going to use these to lead into Jessica's portion here around communication and the importance of inspired leadership. I once read the difference between motivating individuals and inspiring individuals. Motivating people is to get them to do something you want them to do. Inspiring people is to get them to do things that they think are important. And I think the importance of our mission, vision, values team, bringing the collective group of the organization together to shape that, created buy-in, but it also inspired them to want to live our mission, vision, values. So how do we keep this evergreen in our organization? Well, we've kept some of the best practices that Kristy mentioned, monthly memos from me through the organization. I've created videos in Cheryl Shares that we post in our Facebook version of our workplace. And we've kept our weekly staff huddles every Monday morning to talk about what's important in the organization. What we've done in those Monday huddles is added a values nomination. And so every week we are asking our employees to nominate another employee for living one of our values. We share those stories because it keeps us evergreen, and it makes us want to live those and to celebrate those, right? And to recognize that. So we've kept that. We've pivoted in our hybrid work schedules, listening to our employees about what they want and how we can be a best practice organization. And all of that has led to a shift in our culture. The survey that we did in December of 2021 was pretty bad. It did not show an organization that was inspired, that was excited about leaning forward, and we had turnover as a result of that. I'm really excited to share with you that we had our first all hands meeting of the organization of Catapult last week. You, our members, know that we took a day off on Friday to come together as an organization. People had tears in their eyes. I had an employee in my office who said, "This was fantastic. I don't know why I'm welling up with tears, but I'm just so moved at how far we've come as an organization that I'm so proud to be part of this organization." I took that as a great validation that the process that we stuck to, the engagement that we created with employees mattered, and it meant the world of how we're evolving as an organization. So Jessica, I'd like for you to pick it up now and talk about this importance of aligning to the strategic plan, the culture and the collaboration, and how that leads to branding as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cheryl. So when I was initially brought in to Catapult, the focus was going to be on exactly what Cheryl talked about. How do you take what we've done and move it forward with more branding and more outreach across the state? Because again, this was now a statewide organization that had really launched their new brand during COVID. And so they wanted to put focus on that external face and really talk about the new Catapult in the community in a stronger way. And one of the first things that we always do when we bring on a new client is we assess. We look at all of their communications. How is it being received? How is it being heard? And the first thing that we saw very clearly was, wait a minute, you want to take a look internally first. So before you go out into the state and say, here's our new organization, sort of relaunch your new brand, we really realized that we needed to take a look inside still. And again, this was about, I guess, almost a year ago now. And so we were still in a little bit of that messiness that Cheryl mentioned, which is, again, completely normal when you go through this kind of change. But one of the most important things that we found as we dug a little bit deeper into the internal side of the communication and of the One Catapult brand is we really had 4 different audiences of employees that each had very different perspectives. We had Catapult only employees who had been only with the company since the merger. They only knew Catapult. They didn't know the legacy organizations. Very, very different perspective, right? We had some employees who had only known Cheryl as their CEO. Again, very different. They didn't come on before Cheryl, so they weren't aware of all that history. They came on Cheryl's bus and were a part of that Cheryl segment of the sort of timeline of Catapult. Then you had the former CAI employees in Raleigh who again went through the merger, went through all the wonderful work that Kristy and Faster Glass did. And then you had the former TEA employees who also went through that process and all that good work. But if you think about it for a second, just identifying those four very different perspectives that we were trying to communicate to, that Cheryl was doing all this incredibly dynamic work with, but they all looked at it in a very different way. And so we stepped back and we said, okay, so let's think about those different perspectives and how we can really reach into and reach those employees and get them to transition into this one Catapult idea, because that's the ultimate goal, right? You always have these different audiences that you're trying to get your message to, and you want them to move forward together. And added to these different perspectives, we took a look at all of the changes that had happened. Cheryl's mentioned, I think, all of these, but again, her executive leadership team was new. Several departments within the company were new, just because of the turnover that had happened. Because of all the movement, a lot of the folks at their not senior leadership, but that next level of leadership were new people managers. They'd never been in leadership positions before. Then you had these new remote and hybrid work policies that we all are getting used to. You had Cheryl's new strategic framework on top of that. And then this little thing called COVID that not only changed everything about what Catapult talks about and teaches their clients how to deal with, but it changed all of our lives. So everything happened. And the image that I shared a lot with the Catapult team was, if you think of each one of these little, they're not little, they're enormous changes as rocks, you have employees who are just, they're burdened by all of the rocks and the changes. And because it's so heavy, they can't see the vision that Cheryl's presenting and that Faster Glass really pointed the organization toward. And so we needed to take just a quick step back with the internal team, and we needed to acknowledge where everyone was coming from. And we did this at an all hands meeting, got everybody in a room, said, not only do you all feel differently about change. Cheryl mentioned she's a champion, which is fantastic. And there are champions who love change. They're excited. They want to see where it's going to go. But then you have the folks who are the naysayers. They do not like change. Any change is uncomfortable. And then you have that middle ground of folks that are kind of sitting on the fence going, I'm just going to see how this goes. So you have those different just innate approaches to change. Then you have different perspectives based on where people are coming from their work experiences. And so we took a moment to really acknowledge and maybe celebrate these different perspectives. They're all incredibly important to the process. They're incredibly important to the feedback, and that's what's going to really strengthen your team. So you have to take a minute to assess and acknowledge where your different audiences are coming from. And so we spent time there, and then we told them, okay, we've acknowledged it, we hear you, and we know now we need you to come together and we need to move forward as one Catapult. And it's a process, right? This didn't all happen in 10-minute conversation, but it's important to take that step back and really bring those folks along into that one Catapult and that unified approach. So that assessment piece and that just taking the time to stay there for a while was a really important step, I think, in the Catapult journey. Now, the next thing that we took a look at was how do we move forward, right? One of the most important things that we did is we spent time around the change messaging at the point where we were. So again, Faster Glass had done a fantastic job, had really worked on this and done a lot of work in the early period of the transition and the merger. And then, of course, Cheryl had done also an amazing job of messaging where the organization was going. But what we needed to do was, again, bring everybody back for a minute and just reestablish that core message of how Catapult came together. One of the important things that we talk about now when we talk about that merger is the merger didn't create something different. It created something better that's building on the strengths of what was already there. So we're leading from a very positive standpoint, that we're not changing everything because it didn't work, or we aren't looking at it from a negative or you did a poor job perspective. We're looking at it very positively. We're building on those strengths, and together we're going to push this organization and really meet the future of what we do with this one Catapult, and that's just stronger than ever before because of the great work that happened before we came to be. We also reiterated our commitment to the employees of Catapult. Really important at this stage. We have all these amazing things. We're talking about how we're going to serve our clients better and in more effective ways, but we really need to make some fundamental commitments to you. And those were 100% based on the values that Cheryl talked about, that we're going to strive to be an amazing workplace. We're dedicated to these values, and we're going to really provide a working environment that supports you as employees. So again, making just fundamental commitments that we knew wouldn't change. The other thing that was important is that we admit that we are in an ever-changing world right now. Things are changing faster than we can keep up. And again, we're in the people space, which is changing faster than anything else. So change is a constant. But here are some things that you can really rely on, that our organization is doing well, and we are really poised for success. And again, bringing that fundamental stability to our messaging was incredibly important at this piece. So then the last thing that we talked about with Catapult that we really put emphasis on was the change strategy from a communication standpoint. And I think of those as 4 points that are just in a circle. It's constantly circling. One, inform. You cannot tell an employee group too much of what you're trying to communicate. So inform. Tell them again and again, be open. Remember all these different perspectives. So not everyone is hearing what you're saying maybe the first time, and they're hearing it differently. So spend time making sure that you are explaining what you're talking about. Also, when you're cascading things to employees, keep in mind that the people like to hear things from their managers, whether that is a VP or your frontline worker. Everybody likes to hear information from their manager. That's just fundamental. And so be sure that you're providing those people managers the tools that they need to effectively inform their people. Then explain. And as part of that, really state your expectations. Even if you think they know, say it anyway. So when you tell them about something, make sure you're explaining what that means for them, what you expect them to do with that information. Then emphasize it. Hold people accountable, hold teams accountable, hold individuals accountable, touch base, make sure they're hearing the information and that they're doing what you intended. And then lastly, reward. Cheryl mentioned that Catapult rewards values behavior, which is outstanding. When you see someone presenting in a way that you want the organization to present, reward that behavior, point that out, acknowledge it. People then can follow it. And then it all goes back to inform, again, explain, emphasize, and reward. So we really started to focus on that internally, and things are going well. Like, we are definitely seeing impacts. We're definitely seeing movement. The team is really, I think, responding to this focused approach. And so now what's next? So now as we continue to do that work internally, and we don't lose that focus, we are also starting to look more externally and how we can carry this forth. And it's such a great opportunity for Catapult, as I've told Cheryl. Catapult is in the people space, and so the fact that they've been through these transitions, and again, admittedly sticky transitions at times, they have such a wonderful example to share with clients and the broader community. So it's giving us a great base to sort of relaunch Catapult into the state, introduce Cheryl outside of Charlotte, and really help put a face on the organization. So it's gonna, I think, give Catapult even more credibility in that they've been there, and now they can be even more effective in helping clients move forward because they've experienced it, and they not only know what works and the methodology behind it, but they have examples, right? They have real world experience in exactly how it worked and what went well. So really excited about the future and helping relaunch this organization from a brand perspective. And I'll stop there because I know we're close to time. So.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, I think this has been such a great story to show kind of the intentionality from the very get-go of bringing the organizations together. The intentionality in my leadership to honor that, to continue that, to build that. And then to bring us into this next phase where you're right, Jessica, we have lived experience. We can share with our members the things that worked well, the things that didn't work well, how to navigate this. And we've given ourselves an even stronger foundation for 2023 and beyond. And some of the things that Jessica mentioned in the communication strategy, we have now adopted at our all hands meeting last Friday. So developing our 2023 goals in that framework, giving ourselves 1 year metrics. And so, we as an organization wanted to ensure that we're financially viable and healthy. We want to provide awesome customer experiences that increase the loyalty of our members because those experiences were awesome. We as an organization want to transform the way that we do business, right? We want to be ahead of each of you and your organization so that we can lead the best practices. And Jessica mentioned, we want to be an amazing workplace for our own workers, for our own employees. And all of that collectively together will lead to innovation and growth of the organization. And we'll continue to create accountability metrics. We'll continue to track and share our progress with our employees and our successes and our challenges, because having that transparency for employees and for an organization is critical in a change management initiative. So we are at our time here today. I'm sorry we don't have more time to go into Q&A. We will have a copy of this presentation will be available on our website. So anyone who's interested, there were just a few slides in there, but if you're interested in that, credit from the webinar and the recording will be emailed within 48 hours. You'll be able to get your credit for HRCI and SHRM credit as well. And if we at Catapult can answer any questions or help your organizations go through changes like this, our strategic HR solutions team is well poised in both consulting, coaching, communication, change management to help organizations go through these types of initiatives if that's of interest to you. What's next in 2023? Coming up next month, we will launch our HR leadership series, which is called Navigating Today's Workplace. And each quarter we'll select a different topic to focus on. In February, we'll be focused on recruiting. We know that's a hot topic for many of our members now. In April, we'll look at optimizing your HR organization. In the fall, we'll look at compensation and total rewards and see how the COVID and recession and inflation has all impacted salaries and total rewards for employees. And then in November, we'll feature our learning and development in Charlotte. In Raleigh, we're going to switch that up, different dates. So we'll flip it. So total rewards coming first in February, learning and development in April, optimizing your HR in September, and then recruiting in November. Our next Thinking Differently series will be on February 7th, and we'll look at current hiring trends and challenges. We know many of you are facing those. We hope you will join us on February 7th for Thinking Differently. As always, if you have questions or feedback, please let our meeting teams know, and we'll help you out. And thank you, Kristy and Jessica, not only for being here today, but for being on the journey with us at Catapult. Have a great day, everyone.